Okay, we talked about our biogeochemical cycles, right? Biochemical? Yes? Am I saying that right? Yes, biochemical. Okay, so we talked about our cycles. We had the water cycle, carbon and oxygen cycles, the nitrogen cycle, and the phosphorus cycle. Okay, so now I want to look at the negative impacts that we as humans have on these cycles. So first I want to look at the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles together, because nitrogen and phosphorus are major components of fertilizer that is used a lot in farming. Okay, so you have nitrogen and phosphorus. These two elements are very crucial to plant health and plant growth. So plants need nitrogen and phosphorus in order to thrive. The problem is if we put too much in the environment, so we have too much of a good thing, that is when we have issues. So fertilizer is added to the soil, and a big problem of modern day farms is that modern day farms are usually going to focus on one crop, or they're going to focus on one animal. So usually you have a strawberry farm, or you have a blueberry farm, or you have a apple orchard, or you have a wheat field. Okay, so all of these farms are very, very big, and they are focusing on one main crop. The problem with that is that the soil is not used to just producing one crop. The soil is used to having a lot of different diversity, a lot of different plants. So what can happen is your topsoil, so the very top layer of your soil, can dry out. And if it is dry, it is not able to absorb water as well, and means it's not able to absorb the nutrients, especially if you are putting fertilizer on the soil. So if the soil can't absorb the water, if the soil can't absorb the nutrients, then if you put that fertilizer on that topsoil and then rain comes, that rain is going to wash away that topsoil, and it's going to wash away all of that fertilizer, and it's going to wash away all of that phosphorus and nitrogen, and it's going to find its way into the nearest lake, pond, stream, eventually ocean, what have you. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because you're adding too much of a good thing into these water systems. So what's going to happen eventually is that the nitrogen and the phosphorus, which are really good for plants, you have algae in water. So algae is microscopic plant cells. So they're going to take that extra nitrogen and that extra phosphorus, and they are going to ramp up production. They're going to use up all of the oxygen that is in the water, and they're going to basically suffocate everything that is living in that body of water. So then all of the living things in that body of water die, including the algae. So then afterwards you have bacteria coming along and breaking down all of those dead things and using up more of the oxygen, and you just have this cycling effect of just dead things in the water. All because there's way too much nitrogen, way too much phosphorus in this one environment at this one time. Okay. Like I said, it could also affect our oceans. So if there's a farm near the ocean, then those nutrients can find their way into the ocean, and that is when you could have giant algal blooms in the ocean, which are also very not good. Okay. This can also lead to acidic soil and water. So nitrogen and phosphorus are really good at changing the pH of the soil, because different plants are going to thrive differently in different soil. So some plants like soil more acidic, some plants like soil more basic. So if you can change the pH of the soil, then your plant is going to be better. The problem is that if you're adding all of these extra nutrients, all this extra phosphorus and nitrogen, and it's running off into other places where you don't want it to go, then you're changing the pH of the soil somewhere else, and you're also changing the pH of the water somewhere else, and that can also have negative effects. If that water, gentlemen, please pay attention. If that water, again, makes it into the ocean, and you have a higher pH, so you have a more acidic water, and that's going to now go into effect into the water cycle. So now that acidic water is being evaporated into the atmosphere, and then when it falls, now you have acid rain. And acid rain can be somewhere else in the country due to farming in another area in the same country. So this is why it's very important to monitor your input of fertilizer and make sure that your soil is healthy enough to absorb all the fertilizer that you are putting on it. Yes, sir?
How low the pH come out when you did it?
I don't think as low as to where we couldn't go outside.
Right.
Like, you can see the effects of acid rain more on like statues and buildings, and it's over a significant time period. I don't think it shouldn't ever get as bad to where we couldn't walk outside in the rain.
So it's kind of like vinegar. Like, it's like
Kind of, yeah.
pH.
Yes. All right, so in continuation, so phosphorus and nitrogen are both in fertilizers, so we're going to affect both the nitrogen and the phosphorus cycle. Again, a lot of it is due to commercial fertilizers. So again, these big farms that are using giant amounts of fertilizer at one time, and they're going to produce what is called runoff. That is when the fertilizer is not able to be absorbed into the soil, and so when the rain comes, it's going to wash away all of that fertilizer down the drain. So that is called runoff, and that is going to add even more phosphorus and even more nitrogen into those cycles, and the environment just cannot handle all of the nutrients. You have too much of a good thing. So that is called eutrophication. So eutrophication is just the input of excess amount of nutrients, so nitrogen and phosphorus. It's just the input of excess nutrients to where the environment, plants are going to go into overdrive. Mostly algae is going to go into overdrive, and that can have a negative effect where all of the oxygen is being used up in a body of water. So anything else that also needs oxygen to live is not going to be able to survive. So the last cycle that we need to look at is our carbon-oxygen cycle. So, like I said, carbon and oxygen are looked at together. Those two cycles are looked at together because carbon and oxygen are going to come together to make carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is one of your greenhouse gases. So you may have heard the term greenhouse gas effect before. So basically a greenhouse, if you've ever seen a greenhouse, basically what a greenhouse is that it's a small outdoor enclosed area where you are basically changing the environment in order to suit the plant life inside. So where that plant life can thrive better than if it was left out in the normal environment. So you're basically just isolating a certain environment and changing it to benefit you or the plants. So it's basically the same thing. The greenhouse gas effect is the gases in the atmosphere. So we have a thin layer of atmosphere surrounding our planet, and there are gases naturally occurring in that atmosphere, one of them being carbon dioxide. What is supposed to happen, what is typically going to happen, is that the sun and the rays that it gives off and the heat that it gives off is mostly going to be refracted or reflected back into space. So where we only get a portion of that energy, and that's just enough for us. We don't need any more. The problem is that if we are producing more carbon dioxide than what is normally produced, and we're putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas because it is really good at holding in heat and trapping in heat. So if you have an increased amount of carbon dioxide in your atmosphere, you're going to have an increase of trapped heat. And you have that all around the globe. So what's going to happen is that your greenhouse effect is going to increase, and your global temperature, your average global temperature, is also going to increase. If you do your own research and if you look into this, you will see that the global average increase is about 2 degrees, which may not seem like a big number. It may not seem like a big deal. It's only 2 degrees. But you have to realize that that is an average globally. So it is a very big deal. It is a very big increase when you're talking about the big scale of the entire world as a whole, planet. Okay? So your greenhouse gas effect is just going to be the increasing of greenhouse gases. Usually, or more often, it is carbon dioxide, because we as a developed country and other developed countries are going to burn fossil fuels. And when you burn fossil fuels, you are adding more carbon dioxide into the environment or into the atmosphere. So that's going to increase the amount of carbon dioxide, which increases the amount of energy that is held in the atmosphere, which is going to increase your temperature, which is going to cause global warming. And virtually all climate scientists do agree that climate change, global warming, is a thing, and it is something that we need to fix. A big misconception that I feel like you guys are told is that you guys individually can somehow change and help the situation. I'm going to tell you that right now, it is not the case. Because you guys individually do not have that big of a carbon footprint to where you can make that much of a difference that's needed in order to change what's happening. What you do need to do, and what I do hope you do, I do hope that you do as much as you can, and with reducing, recycling, and reusing, because whatever change you can make and however you can help is beneficial, is good. But I hope that you also realize that you need to also advocate for these companies, these giant corporations, these giant factories that are burning fossil fuels, unconcerned of how much carbon dioxide they're producing and how much carbon dioxide they're putting into the environment. Because that's going to be where we make the big difference, is getting these corporations to realize that they are going to be the ones to help the most. You guys individually, you guys can do as much as you can, but the big picture overall is looking at these giant corporations, these giant factories that are just pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay? So this picture down here is showing you the average production of greenhouse gases. So again, carbon dioxide is one of them, but carbon dioxide is usually the biggest one, the most one that affects us. So obviously your developed countries are going to produce more, and your non-developed countries are going to produce less, obviously. So then it would be a good argument that your developed countries should hold a higher responsibility in making sure that our greenhouse gas effect does not go unchecked. Again, big, giant factories. Okay. Are there any questions about the cycles? Any questions about plants? Human impact on anything? Any questions? Okay, so that is the end of the unit. So I will hand out your worksheets now. So you will start working on them tomorrow, or you will start working on them today, you'll work on them tomorrow, and then our test is on Friday. Okay?